In the heart of a towering city skyline, inside the glass walls of a billion-dollar company called Cronex Industries, a woman stood silently behind her mahogany desk. Her name was Alina Reeve. She was only 34, but already the CEO of one of the most powerful private tech firms in the country. She didn't smile much. She didn't speak more than necessary. But when she looked at you, cold, unreadable, you knew she saw everything. Alina hadn't always been this powerful. She had started at Cronex as an intern, 10 years ago, when no one remembered her name. She fetched coffee, made copies, and stayed late. Back then, the board was all male. Her boss was a smug director named Calvin Mars, and everyone referred to her as the quiet girl with the cheap shoes. But Alina remembered everything, every insult, every smirk, every time they excluded her from meetings or dismissed her ideas. Her revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was silent and perfect. For years, she studied every department, every flaw in the system, every person with a weakness, and she waited. When the opportunity came, she didn't hesitate. She worked weekends, built private alliances, exposed the illegal dealings of senior managers, anonymously. One by one, they fell, and when the smoke cleared, she was the last one standing. The board, in a desperate move to save face, promoted her to CEO. They thought they were using her, but she had already won. Now 2 years into her reign, the same men who once laughed at her called her Madame Reeve. But not everyone had learned their lesson. The company's global expansion plan had attracted sharks. Calvin Mars had returned, not as a director, but as an external investor, trying to worm his way back into the company through money and influence. Alongside him were his old allies, Jacob Flynn, head of strategy, Derek Shaw, legal counsel, and Melissa Crane, PR director. They smiled in meetings, acted polite, but Alina knew they mocked her in private. She didn't confront them. Instead, she observed. They thought they were smart, forming side groups, whispering about a coup, plans to pressure the board to replace her, using her emotional leadership style and questionable decisions as excuses. But Alina had hired a new assistant, Rena, a quiet, eager-to-please graduate who happened to be a data genius. Rena didn't just manage Alina's calendar. She tracked whispers across Slack, dug through emails, and quietly recorded late-night meetings in conference rooms they thought were unwatched. The evidence grew. Alina knew she could strike at any time, fire them in public, make a scene, go viral. But that wasn't her style. She waited. She let them believe they were gaining ground. She gave Melissa more visibility in press briefings. She approved Jacob's bold but flawed strategy memo. She even let Calvin have a meeting with the board, knowing he thought he was being clever. Then came Friday morning. It was the quarterly all-staff town hall. 1,000 employees. On live stream, executives present, board members watching. Alina took the stage. Dressed in her signature black suit, lips painted the color of fire. She didn't speak immediately. The silence was powerful. Then she began. In the last quarter, Cronex exceeded its global target by 27%. We expanded into 4 new markets and tripled our security division revenue. That didn't happen by accident. She paused. It happened because I removed obstacles, and today I'm doing it again. The room shifted. One by one, she projected emails on the screen. Proof of sabotage, leaked documents, manipulation, and unethical deals. No names were mentioned, yet the entire company watched in shock. And then calmly, she said, Jacob Flynn, Melissa Crane, Derek Shaw, and Calvin Mars, your services are no longer required. HR has already deactivated your access. Your termination letters have been sent. Security walked in, almost invisible. No drama, just professionalism. The 4 looked stunned, furious, but Alina didn't flinch. Ladies and gentlemen, she continued, leadership is not about being loud. It's about being clear. This company will never again be ruled by fear, gossip, or games. We lead with results. We lead with truth. The applause was thunderous. Later that evening, alone in her office, Alina looked out at the city. It was quiet. Her assistant brought her tea. You okay? Rena asked. Alina nodded. They thought silence meant weakness. They forgot silence can also mean strategy. She smiled for the first time that day. Far from the boardrooms and news headlines, the fired executives scrambled to protect their reputations. But it was too late. Alina had already sent the proof of their wrongdoing to regulatory bodies. Their careers were over. And in the shadows, she'd planted new allies. Ready to rise. Women and men who worked hard, stayed honest, and never forgot who believed in them. From that day on, Chronex became known, not just for its technology, but for being the company led by the cold, silent, and perfect boss who never forgot what betrayal felt like. And never let it happen again. And somewhere deep down, every man who mocked her still saw her face when they closed their eyes. Calm, precise and untouchable. The storm Alina released that day didn't end with firings. It began a quiet reckoning. Employees who had once hesitated to speak up now felt a strange sense of safety. Not because Alina was warm. She wasn't, but she never shouted, never threatened, yet everyone felt the weight of her presence. You didn't lie. You didn't scheme. You either did your job well or you were out. Behind the scenes, she began reorganizing the company. The PR department, once controlled by Melissa Crane and full of media manipulation, was stripped and rebuilt. Alina brought in a young strategist named Farah Day, a Bangladeshi woman in her late 20s who had worked in nonprofit digital advocacy. Farah knew little about corporate spin, but she knew how to tell honest stories. And that's what Alina wanted. No more shiny lies, just truth. Meanwhile, Rena, the assistant-turned-shadow analyst, kept working in silence. She became Alina's invisible weapon. She monitored patterns, analyzed internal loyalty, and helped root out dormant threats. Every project, every whisper of mutiny, Rena saw it first. But the outside world wasn't blind. Calvin Mars, after being ousted, didn't disappear. He began leaking rumors to the press, calling Alina the Ice Queen, accusing her of abusing power. Old rivals from her intern days echoed him, anonymous forums filled with speculation. Was she too controlling? Too cold? Too ambitious? Alina didn't respond. Instead, she gathered her board. At the next executive summit, she laid out a 3-year plan to enter defense-grade cybersecurity, a risky, aggressive move that would put Chronex on a new level entirely. It was bold, it was expensive, and it terrified the board. The chairman, Edward Lang, a silver-haired traditionalist who had once favored Calvin, leaned forward. "You're proposing war," he said. Alina looked at him, eyes unblinking. "No, I'm ending it before it begins." The vote was 5-4. It passed. With that, Alina activated what she'd quietly built, the ICE Protocol, a code name for a division, so secretive only 5 people knew the full scope. It focused on 2 things: digital espionage, countermeasures and internal security for Fortune 500 clients. She hired ex-intelligence officers, elite coders, and contract lawyers who specialized in information warfare. Suddenly, Chronex wasn't just a tech company. It became a fortress. Clients poured in. Competitors panicked. And Calvin Mars? He vanished from headlines altogether, but not everyone celebrated. Inside the company, a new kind of fear started to rise. People admired her, yes, but many also feared her too much to speak candidly. The culture was changing, becoming quieter, more rigid. Rena noticed it first. One night, she lingered in Alina's office, hesitant. "Can I say something? Honestly?" Alina nodded. "People are loyal to you, but they're afraid. Maybe too afraid." Alina leaned back. Her expression didn't change, but her silence deepened. Finally, she said, "Fear keeps people sharp." "But fear doesn't build legacy," Rena replied. The words struck deeper than Alina admitted. That night, alone in her penthouse, she thought of her early days. The janitor who had once given her an umbrella in the rain, the security guard who taught her to ignore office gossip, the kindness she'd survived on, and how little of it she now gave. Had she become what she swore to destroy? The next week, she walked the building floor by floor, no warning, no cameras. She talked to employees, not executives, but receptionists, interns, assistants, listened, asked questions. She didn't smile, but she listened. Slowly, trust returned. And so did something else. Loyalty not born from fear, but from respect. But then a threat returned. An anonymous whistleblower claimed Chronex's ICE protocol was spying on client data. A government investigation was launched. The media erupted. Stocks plummeted. It was sabotage, but by whom? Rena worked night and day, tracing the data breach. The signal led to an unexpected name. Liam Carver, Chronex's chief technology officer, a genius with numbers, and one of the few people Alina had trusted without question. She confronted him in her office. "You sold code to our rivals. Framed us for spying. Why?" Liam stood tall, bitter. "Because I built that tech. I deserve to lead it. But you're just the intern who made it to the top on fear and manipulation. You don't inspire. You rule." Alina's face didn't move, but her words were sharp. "No, I outworked, outthought, and outlasted every man who thought exactly like you." He smirked. "Then finish me." But Alina didn't fire him. Not then. She exposed him first. A press release went live within the hour, outlining the breach, the betrayal, and the decisive measures taken. Cronex's stock began to recover. Alina sued Liam personally for intellectual theft and corporate espionage. The courtroom hearings were televised. She didn't show anger. She showed proof. And when the judge ruled in Cronex's favor, awarding $140 million in damages, the world saw Alina Reeve not as the Ice Queen, but as a force no one could bury in silence. Back at Cronex HQ, her staff greeted her with something unexpected. Not just quiet nods, but applause. Real applause, respect. And for the first time, Alina allowed herself to exhale. She wasn't cold. She was precise. She wasn't cruel. She was focused. And she wasn't alone. Rena stood beside her now, not as an assistant, but as Cronex's youngest ever director of strategic operations. Alina had quietly rewritten her title and salary during the chaos. She rewarded loyalty, not with words but actions. In the months that followed, Cronex became a model of ethical strength and impenetrable integrity. Its culture grew healthier. Its profits soared. Alina didn't attend every press event. She didn't crave attention. Her presence was enough. Every now and then, she'd look at her reflection in the glass wall behind her desk. Not to admire, but to remind herself, you don't have to be loud to win. You just have to be unshakable. Her revenge had never been about anger. It had been about justice. Not with fire, but with frost. Cold, silent, and absolutely perfect. Months passed. Cronex became untouchable in its field. Contracts flowed in from defense agencies, financial giants, and foreign governments. Alina's face rarely appeared in the media, but her legend grew. Other CEOs spoke of her with a mix of admiration and fear. Her name was whispered in boardrooms, across industries. Alina Reeve, the one who could destroy a career with silence. But not everyone was content with her rule. In the shadows of her rising empire, Elliot Blackwell, former CEO of Vantatech, Cronex's fiercest competitor, watched. He had once laughed off the idea of Cronex becoming a threat. Now Alina had snatched 3 of his biggest clients and had hired away his brightest minds, and she'd done it all without ever speaking to him. He wasn't just losing, he was being humiliated. So he hired someone, Lauren Tate, an ex-investigative journalist turned corporate saboteur. Her task? To infiltrate Cronex, find Alina's weaknesses, expose her. Lauren applied as a cultural consultant, crafting a resume filled with buzzwords and impressive fake references. She passed the interviews. Rena flagged her file as too polished, but Alina let her in anyway. "Let her come," Alina said quietly. "Even traps can reveal truth." Lauren began observing. She shadowed team leaders, interviewed employees, documented the company's internal climate. She was subtle, careful, but not careful enough. Alina had given her full access on purpose. She wanted to see how deep betrayal could go. What Lauren didn't know was that every terminal she used was mirrored. Every document she copied was tagged. Every question she asked was traced to a pattern. After 6 weeks, she scheduled a private session with Alina. "I've found some things," Lauren said confidently, sitting across from her. "Things your competitors might find interesting." Alina didn't blink. She simply turned her monitor toward Lauren and pressed play. It was Lauren's own voice, caught on a call to Elliot Blackwell. "She's too clean. No corruption, no skeletons. But I'll find something. Everyone breaks eventually." Lauren's face turned white. "You're not the first to try," Alina said, her voice low. "But you may be the last who thought I wouldn't notice." Security entered the room. Lauren didn't fight. She knew she was finished. Alina didn't press charges. She didn't need to. Instead, she sent a digital file directly to Elliot, containing every step of Lauren's sabotage, signed with one line: "Try again. I'll make it public next time. AR." Within a week, Elliot Blackwell resigned as CEO of Vantatech, and still, Alina said nothing to the press. Her silence was louder than any headline. Inside Cronex, her legend deepened. But something else was changing too. Employees weren't just loyal, they were proud. The company became known for promoting from within. Interns became managers. Coders became division heads. Women especially thrived under Alina's reign. She didn't preach feminism. She lived it, silently, ruthlessly. Yet even the strongest empires have fragile corners. Rena, once the eager assistant, now a high-ranking executive, began working longer hours. She barely slept. She worried she was becoming what Alina once was. Cold, efficient, distant. One night, she knocked on Alina's office door. It was past midnight. "You still here?" Alina asked without turning around. "So are you," Rena said softly. Alina finally looked at her. "I'm scared," Rena confessed, "that I'm turning into someone who feels nothing." "Like you?" Alina didn't react for a moment. Then she walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a small locked box. She handed it to Rena. "Open it." Inside was a handwritten letter. Not corporate, not typed, personal. Rena read, "To the woman I used to be, I haven't cried in years. I haven't trusted anyone since I learned what betrayal feels like. But if you're reading this, it means someone came close enough to matter again. Maybe not everything was meant to be cold. Maybe some things deserve warmth, but you must choose carefully. Because not everyone who smiles means well." Rena looked up. "You wrote this?" Alina nodded. "The night I became CEO. Why are you showing me now?" "Because you haven't lost your heart, and I need that in this company." In that quiet moment, something shifted. Cronex wasn't just Alina's empire anymore. It was becoming something bigger. Something built on silence. Yes, but also on transformation. A year later, Cronex launched a revolutionary data ethics platform. Alina didn't speak at the event. Rena did. And the world saw what Alina had built. Not just a company, but a generation of leaders who feared nothing, followed no one blindly, and never forgot what silence could achieve. They still mocked her in whispers, here and there. They called her cold, called her too perfect, too calculating, too untouchable. But those who mocked her never lasted long. And those who followed her? They didn't just survive. They conquered, cold, silent, and perfectly unstoppable. 3 years after Alina Reeve had become CEO, Cronex Industries was no longer just a rising tech firm. It had become a global powerhouse. Nations consulted it, rivals feared it, and competitors collapsed trying to keep up. Its culture of discipline, integrity, and quiet execution had become legendary. And at the center of it all was Alina, unreadable, precise, untouchable. But silence always draws echoes. And in a quiet office on the 31st floor of a new AI consulting firm, another echo was building. Nora Vale, a former Cronex employee who had left quietly 2 years ago, after her project was shelved, now led a rival startup, Syntexa. On the surface, it appeared modest, a company focused on healthcare tech and AI diagnostics. But beneath the branding, Syntexa was aggressively poaching Cronex engineers and silently stealing code architecture, cloaked behind subtle modifications and shell companies. Alina had noticed. She said nothing, again. Instead, she directed Rena and a new recruit, Ishan Malik, a soft-spoken cybersecurity analyst, to investigate every whisper of code theft. They found hundreds of lines of Cronex logic mirrored in Syntexa's infrastructure. Just different enough to avoid a legal trail, but identical in function. Rena was furious. "They're bold." Alina stared out the window. Bold people are easy to break, especially when they think silence means permission. But this time, Alina didn't strike immediately. She waited until Syntexa secured a $400 million deal with a major healthcare provider, using Cronex's stolen AI model. The announcement flooded business news. The media declared it the rise of the next tech queen, crowning Nora Vale as the new female force in Silicon Valley. That same evening, Alina hosted a private dinner. 8 guests, no press, all of them directors from the healthcare provider Syntexa had signed. She spoke softly, directly, and showed them undeniable digital forensics. At the end of the evening, she said, "You can proceed with the stolen system. Or you can come to Cronex tomorrow and license the original, directly, securely, permanently." By morning, Syntexa's $400 million contract was terminated. They were also slapped with an intellectual theft lawsuit so watertight, every one of their investors pulled out within 72 hours. Nora never recovered. Her face, once on magazine covers, disappeared into silence, The kind of silence that swallows. Ambition without warning. The press begged Alina for interviews, for a comment, for a quote. She gave none. Her silence was her branding. It didn't just speak, it echoed across industries. Internally, Cronex shifted. A second headquarters opened in Singapore, led by Rena. Under her leadership, new divisions bloomed, focused on ethical AI, education, and women in tech. For the first time, the company wasn't just about defense and dominance. It was about legacy. One evening, Alina received a letter, handwritten. The ink faded and uneven. Dear Alina, I used to think power belonged to the loud, but watching you, I realized something. Real power is invisible until it moves. You moved the world. You didn't scream. You didn't fight dirty. You just never stopped. I was wrong about you. Thank you for proving me wrong. Melissa Crane. Alina didn't smile. She simply folded the letter and placed it in the same box where she had kept her own from years ago. The box was fuller now. Dozens of letters. Messages from people who once mocked her, feared her, misunderstood her, now thanking her. But not everyone forgave her. And she never asked for it. Some said she was too cold. Others said she was lonely. Some believed she never truly loved anything outside work. They were all wrong. Alina loved building. Not empires, people. Quiet people. Honest people. Fighters who didn't punch with fists, but with persistence. And she loved silence. Because in silence, everything becomes clear. In silence, you hear who's loyal. In silence, you see who's waiting to betray you. And in silence, you prepare the perfect revenge. Years later, long after she stepped down as CEO and passed the crown to Rena, Alina disappeared from public view. She never wrote a memoir. Never joined another board. She bought a quiet house in the mountains away from the city. But her name never disappeared. New CEOs carried copies of her speeches. Women in boardrooms quoted her strategies. Young interns whispered her story. She was mocked, underestimated, and then she ruled. And every once in a while, a company somewhere would collapse. Quietly, mysteriously, after betraying its people. They'd call it market failure, or economic shift, or poor leadership. But those who knew, those who understood silence, they whispered one name, Alina Reeve. She had never needed applause. She had never needed revenge served hot. Because the coldest revenge, the one that freezes legacies in place and buries egos forever, is the kind that's cold, silent, and perfect.